Hello, I'm Greg. Welcome to my channel, Midnight Oil Software, and episode 3 of my Highland Panic Devlog series. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I implemented the gameplay logic, and also how I implemented the AI logic for the bot players. But before I do that, I want to show you a little bit about the current state of the game, and let you know that it is now available for playtest on Steam. If you were to hop over to my Steam page, you can see down here there is this Play Now button under the Play the Highland Panic Playtest Now. You've been invited to play. Click to install and get started. So this is an open playtest, so anybody that wants to join the playtest can just come to my page and click this button. I will put a link in the description to my Steam's page. And also, if you want to join the Apple App Store beta program, I'll put a link to that as well. That's also open to anybody that has an iPhone or an iPad that wants to try it. And finally, if you want to test it for Android, I'll put a link in the description for the playtest on Google Play, but you're going to have to send me your email address for me to add you as a tester. There doesn't seem to be any way for me to just make that an open test on Google Play. And I do need to point out that Google Play is now forcing us to target API level 31 for Android builds, which eliminates a lot of the older hardware. So a lot of my friends that have Androids are not able to test this on their devices, unfortunately. But let me switch back over to Unity, and I'm going to just play the game real quick and show you some of the changes that I've made. So I'm playing in the editor, and this is the Windows build, which is what I would deploy to Steam. But I could also build for iOS or Android. One thing I did is, I think I already covered this before, is I refactored the portrait selection screen to make that nicer. But I also changed and fixed some bugs that were centered around the login and adding of bots. One thing I did is I got rid of the number of players here. Because you can start the game even with just one player or two players. It didn't make sense to just specify how many players you want, because you can start the game whenever you want. Adding a bot, I've got some cool new sound effects for that. I kind of like that. And then you can adjust the skill level of the bots. If you put them on advanced, they are very, very, very tough. I'm going to go ahead and click start so you can see what that looks like. I tweaked the card colors a little bit, and I put a little bit of a black outline around the card numbers. That was based on some feedback that I got from different playtesters that felt that the cards were a little bit difficult to read. One thing I would like to know is, what do you think of these colors? I'm not sold on them. I kind of feel like they're a little bit pastel for my taste. They're not quite as vibrant as they were, especially the green and the blue. But I am interested to hear what you think. I've also had a suggestion that when you play a 10th card on a pile here, that I flip that card over to show that this pile can no longer be played on, to kind of remove the distraction, because you got all these piles to look at while you're playing. Let me know what you think about that idea. Want to go back and show you how you can play with a combination of human players and bots. So I'm going to go ahead and create a game. I'm going to add a bot. And then I'm going to join the game on my iPhone. So I'm just going to click join here. And you can see that I showed up down there. Let's join from another device. I'm going to take my iPad, if I can get it in front of the screen. I'm going to click join. And now you can see that I've showed up there. And I'm going to go ahead and click start. And you can see the game is starting on the iPad and on the iPhone. So those are some exciting things. You can play solo against bots. You can play online against your friends. You can play a combination of online and bots. So let's go take a little bit of look at the code, and I'll show you how I implemented the gameplay logic. Specifically, I want to show you how I implemented multiplayer and explain that to you, and then show you how I was able to take that same architecture and use it to support bots. Okay, so here we are in our gameplay scene. I want to look at a couple of things in here with you. First of all, let's look at our game manager. I want you to see that the game manager has 4 player panels. If we were to expand our game canvas and our viewport, you'll see that there are 4 player panels. You can see one of them right here. So this is always going to be the local player. So you can have up to 4 players in the game, and you're always going to see your cards on this player panel here, and your opponent's cards will surround you. This will be player 2, player 3, player 4 from your perspective. So they, of course, would see their cards here, and then if you're player 2, they would see you here, and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and disable those. Inside the player panel, there's a number of different things. I think I covered this in the previous video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But the main thing is all the logic for handling playing cards really is in this player panel UI class. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And I've collapsed everything down to definitions, and I'm using regions here just to make it a little bit easier. This is a big class. I really need to refactor this and split it out into multiple classes, basically to enforce the single responsibility pattern. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just trying to get it working, and it is pretty much working. So I think pretty soon I'm going to go in there and do some refactoring. But I'm going to start out by showing you how some of this stuff works. So first of all, in initialization, I want to initialize all of the card UI elements for each card that I have. And we're going to initialize them, and it's going to basically, every card UI is going to have a corresponding card associated with it. And it's going to display the background color of the card, the number of the card, the gender of the card, and so forth. And in the card back, of course, depending on which player owns the card. Now, when you want to actually try and play a card, everything is done using remote procedure calls. So, for instance, when I want to deal cards, this method is called from the game manager when it's time to deal a card. So let me go over here and look at the game manager. And we're going to scroll down until we see deal cards. All right. From the initialize method here, when we first initialize our cards, we initialize all the player panels, and then we tell them all to deal their cards. So deal cards is going to start a coroutine, and it's going to start a coroutine on each panel's deal cards, which is the function we were just looking at. And since this is a coroutine, I can animate dealing each individual card. So we're going to deal out 1 card to the castle pile. We're going to deal out 1 card to each of the trading piles, and then we're going to deal 10 cards to the panic pile. And we're going to animate all of those. And so we've got these yield returns with a delay in here. And by the way, I cache my delay so that I'm not creating garbage on the heap every time I want to use a yield return. So if we look at this, I'm instantiating this deal delay to be 0.2 seconds in my init method. So I'm only instantiating this once. I'm not creating a new one inside that update loop or inside that coroutine, creating garbage on the heap that would have to be cleaned up later. So in deal cards, I basically go through all of my trading piles and deal 1 card to each of them. So I have this deal to pile method. This is where I basically get the card UI element for the card that I'm drawing. And this is all in a dictionary. So I'm using a lot of dictionaries in my game to make looking things up quickly. So I have a dictionary to go from a card ID to the corresponding card UI. And I also have a list of pile transforms. So I want to find the card pile transform for this pile, because we're basically going to parent this card to that transform object. One thing I do when I deal a card is I flip it. So if it's face down, I flip it face up. I want to set the parent to this player panel temporarily while I'm animating it. So the player panel was the overall canvas, and I want the animation to just go from the source pile to the destination pile before I parent it to the destination pile. I turn on particle trails for the card UI. I set that card UI active so you can now see it, and then I use do tween to animate the card from the source pile position to the destination pile position. And then I have this on complete callback here where I turn off the particle trail. I play a sound that you hear when you play the card. I add it to that pile's cards, and then I raise a change event for that pile so that all the players can update their display with the current state of that pile. What I think you're really interested, though, is playing cards. Now, I initially in this game, you could drag and drop cards from one pile to another, and I found out that there were some issues because I did something where I had what's called a drag stack. So, like if I was to start dragging, I would basically populate this drag stack. If I can open that up. I would populate a drag stack with the card that I'm dragging, and that drag stack would also have the source stack that I took the card from, and I would check as I'm moving the card, as I'm dragging it, to see if it was over a pile that it was legal to drop the card on. And if that was the case, I would enable a shine around that pile so you know that's a legal drop location. But because of some of the way I do the syncing logic between the local player and the server, if you try to play a card to a destination pile and it's not a legal play because maybe somebody beat you to that spot, I would send a reject message to the player who tried to play it. And I think sometimes, depending on timing, I could screw up my drag stack while I was still dragging a card, and it didn't know that it was rejected, and it would just get stuck in limbo. And anyway, when I play this game, I always double-click to play the cards. I never drag and drop anyway. And so I just figured it's not worth trying to figure this out and debug this for now. So I commented out all the drag and drop logic. I actually put it behind a preference that I can turn on and off, where if I enable that preference, I can actually do drag and drop. But for now, it's just double-click to play a card. But I'm still using the concept of a drag stack. So like when I double-click a card, what I want to do is I want to attempt to play to the clan pile first. So the best play you can make is from whatever card you're clicking on, play it to one of the clan piles in the middle, because that's where you get your points, right? If we go and look at that, I basically do a bunch of logic where I want to populate that drag stack so it knows what pile I'm playing from, what pile I'm trying to play to. I save off like the transform form. I want to set in this drop data that I'm going to pass to the server, the player just trying to play the card, the source pile, the card he's playing, the destination pile, and all that. So the reason I populate this drag stack, it's kind of redundant now. I probably could comment this out, but I wanted to be able to animate it back to the source pile if the play was rejected. So the drag stack, probably I could comment all this stuff out since I'm not really dragging and dropping anymore. But the important thing is the way I try to drop the card. So, try drop card. This is where the magic happens. I call the game manager's attempt drop server remote procedure call, passing in my drop data. So, everything is using remote procedure call. So, a server RPC is an RPC, a remote procedure call that can be called from the client. As long as I set require ownership equal false, any client can call this. And so I'm passing in my drop data. I got a bunch of debug statements in here because I was trying to debug all the drag and drop and play card logic and everything. It's all working now, so I can probably get rid of these log statements. But one thing I do is I get the card from my dictionary based on the ID that was passed in. I also get the pile that I'm playing from and the pile that I'm trying to play to. And then what I'm doing here, reject card drop. Basically, I say, looking at my destination pile, and I use a lot of extension methods in this game, by the way. So I have an extension method. Actually, this is actually on the card pile itself. That's right. This is a virtual method on the card pile, and every type of card pile overrides this method. So there'll be one for the clan pile, there'll be one for trading piles, and so forth. So if that pile determines that it's a legal drop to take this card and play it on top of their pile, then I'm going to return true. Otherwise, I'm going to return false, and I'm going to populate this string with the reason why it couldn't be played. So let's take a look at some of my implementations of this. All right, so I hit go to derived symbols. I'm going to go to our clan pile. Let's look at our clan pile's logic for is legal drop. All right, so I check first of all to say, are there any cards there? If there are, then if the card I'm trying to drop is not 1, I can't play there. So on the clan piles, they're like the foundation piles in solitaire. You start with a 1, and then you can play any other card that's a 1 greater than the current top card, but it has to be the same color. So you can play a green 2 on a green 1, and a green 3 on a green 2, and so forth. So if the count is 0 and it's not 1, then I return false, and I say that the reason is that only a card with the value of 1 can be dropped onto an empty clan pile. And I could have just returned false here. I don't know why I'm saying return card value equals 1. I should just return false here. The other thing I do is I get the top card from the pile, and I want to look at it. And if the suits are not the same, then I say you cannot drop onto, let's see, a red card cannot be dropped onto a blue card, whatever, right? The other thing I do is I check the value of the card and make sure that it's 1 greater than the top card. If it's not, then I say 3 cannot be placed on a 1 or whatever. So anyway, what I'm returning here is just a simple Boolean. If the color is not the same as that top card's color and the value is not 1 greater than that value, then return false. And I just realized that this should be color and not suit. And this doesn't really matter because it's only for the reason message. And I'm not even using that reason message except in my log statements. But still, I don't want to have an error in my code there. All right, let's go out of the clan pile for now and go back into the player panel UI. So I try to drop a card by calling the attempt drop server RPC. So, all right, so I try this if reject card drop. So if this was not a valid play, then I just return. And this reject card drop is going to call this drop attempt rejected client RPC. All right, and so it's going to send an RPC saying that play was rejected. And so if we go and look at that, I basically say, I look up the player panel for the player ID that tried to make that play, and I call his drop rejected. And so that player is basically going to, now initially when I was allowing drag and drop, you could have multiple cards on the drag stack, because I was thinking that on the trading piles, I would have the piles offset vertically so you could see the card that was above, and you can maybe grab the top, parent card and drag a whole stack of cards. So that's what this for loop is here. That is an artifact of that. I'll probably refactor this and get rid of it. But at any rate, I take the card that was attempted to play, and I'm essentially going to turn its shine off. I'm going to set its parent to the source stack, and I'm going to enable its collider to be true so it can be picked back up again. And then I'm going to reset that drag stack information. So again, all that drag stack stuff I can probably get away with, just eliminate because I'm not dragging and dropping anymore. Going back into the game manager, so I called that drop attempt rejected client RPC, so that's good. What if I didn't reject it? Well, then I check to see, are we playing to a clan pile? If we are, then I want to play move card from source pile to destination pile. And this is an extension method. So an extension method that takes a type of card. And what I do is I draw the top card from the source pile, and then I add it to the destination pile. All right. And then I call this card played client RPC. So what does that do? So every client is going to receive this notification. It's basically saying, hey, all the information in this drop data, which is, the player the source ID, the card ID, the destination pile ID. We're going to get all that information. We're going to get the card that was played, the source pile that was played, the destination was played to, and then depending on whether or not we're the host or whether or not the pile type is a clan pile or not, we're going to look up that panel and we're going to call play card. So this is the player panel for the player. So if whatever player played this card, we're going to look up that panel. So remember, every player is seeing the board from their perspective. So if you are, if your player ID has you on this one, the player that played that card might be on this panel or that panel. So he's going to be somewhere relative to you. We got to get the right panel for your perspective to do this animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call play card on that panel. And I'm going to enable the particle trails on the card. I'm going to get that destination transform for the pile we're playing to. I'm going to reset my drag stack if I'm the current player. If the player that played the card is me. And then I'm going to animate the card play. So let's see what that looks like. So I again set the card's parent to the player panel, which is the canvas. I get its position from the source pile, and then I tween it to the destination pile's position. And then in on complete, I turn off the particle trail and I call finish card play. So finish card play, it's going to play a sound first of all. I have like a random array of card play sounds that I'll play, give a little variety. And then if this update piles is true, I'm going to update the source pile to the destination pile using that extension method we looked at. I'm going to set the parent to the destination pile transform, and I have an offset for each so that you can tell that there's more than one card in the pile as they get displayed at an offset. And then I'm going to raise change events for the source pile and the destination pile. What else am I going to do? If it is a clan pile, I want to play an effect, a starburst effect with a little sound effect whenever you play a card to the clan pile. Just a little cosmetic sugar there. If the source pile is an empty trading pile, then I want to call this play panic card to trading pile animation here. And then let's see, I want to check to see if the panic pile is empty. If it's not, then I want to say, hey, this player just panicked. So if the panic pile is empty, I want to let them know, hey, I panicked. We're going to change the game state to scoring, and I'm going to handle scoring. I'm going to call a handle scoring client RPC on all the clients, and they're going to animate. They're going to show the round over message, and they're going to call this coroutine to calculate the scores. Where this is where they animate the cards from the clan piles to the various player piles and add the points, and then subtract any points for any panic piles you still had left over. Which is what this one does here. And I, of course, play little sound effects in the on complete thing here. This little prefab, subtract score prefab. It shows up a little -2, -2, -2 every time you subtract points. So that's basically how the basic gameplay works. So you try to play a card by calling a server RPC. It checks to see if it's valid. If it's valid, it sends a client RPC to all the clients. They update their local copies of the cards, play the animations, send a message back to the server when they're done doing all that. And we check to see if the game is over or if the round is over at that point. So how do I do the bot player logic? So that's where we're going to get into the really cool logic about how this architecture, the way I architected this multiplayer logic using a client RPC, server RPC mechanism, it just lent itself very well to adding bots to the game. So over here in the Game Manager class, I want to show you, I've got an array of actually a number of bot players. So I have a players list, which is a list of player wrappers. And the player wrapper is used to encapsulate both the human players and the bot players. And I basically just have a property on there about whether or not I'm a bot. Okay. And I needed to do this because the players are actually added to the lobby, but then the bots are added as metadata to the lobby. And I need to have a way to group them all together to just treat them as players, right? So as far as the game is concerned, a player is a player. It doesn't care whether you're a bot or whether you're a human. You're going to have an ID, you're going to have a name, you're going to have a portrait that I display. And that's information that's going to be common whether you're a bot or a player. So I wanted to show you that so you can get an idea of how I'm going to handle this. So I have that list of player wrappers, and then I have a number of bot players, and I'm basically just doing a little link expression, which is how many of those are bots, right? And then humans are just how many are not bots. So let's go look at where we actually use them. So I'm actually going to populate a separate list with a bot card player object. All right, now the bot card player, I need to initialize as clan piles, castle piles, panic piles, trading piles, and I want to have this play delay. So the logic to play a card, if you're a bot, is going to be extremely simple. You're going to be astounded, I think, of how short the actual AI logic is in this. Almost no code at all to do this. But in order to make them skillful, you know, the difference between a beginner bot and an advanced bot is nothing more than how long the delay is between when they can play. So if you're playing an advanced bot, it's going to play every 2 seconds. And I did add a little bit of variability in there, so it's going to be like half a second more or less. But on average, 2 seconds if you're an advanced bot, on average 4 seconds if you're intermediate, and then on average 6 seconds between plays if you're a beginner. So how do I do that? Well, I have a tick method. So the game manager is going to call this tick method from update. I'm doing almost nothing in update in this game. Everything is through RPCs, events. This is really the only update you're going to see pretty much in this game. And all I'm doing is if I'm playing and I'm the host, then I'm going to iterate through all my bot players and call their tick method. That's my update loop for the game. So in there, the tick method checks to see, can I play? Basically, is the time still less than my next play time? If it is, I'm just going to return and do nothing. Otherwise, I have these methods here. Attempt to play pile to clan pile. Attempt to play to from the panic pile to the empty trading pile. Attempt to play from a trading pile to a clan pile, from a castle pile to a clan pile, from a panic pile to a trading pile, or just from the castle pile to a trading pile, and finally just swap 2 trading pile cards. If I can't do any of those, I'm just going to draw cards. And I'm going to reset my delay. That's the AI logic. And each of these is just basically saying if it's a legal drop or not. You know, attempt clan pile drop. Basically just checks to see, you know, looking at all my clan piles, are any of them illegal drop for this card? If they are, attempt drop and return true. All right, so all of these are just attempting a drop to whatever pile I'm trying to play from and to. And then the attempt drop, this is where I actually make the server RPC call, just like if I was a human player double clicking on a card. I just populate my drop data, call that attempt drop server RPC, and reset my play delay. Now I also have this thing, can rearrange trading pile. I want to make sure I don't constantly just swap trading pile cards if I can't play any other card, right? I want to fall through to the draw cards, and I only want to do this once until I actually play a clan pile card. So this is just a flag that I reset if I played a clan pile card. So let's see, I initialize at the true. If I can rearrange the trading pile, I'll try that. Otherwise, I reset this to basically be that the destination pile type was not a trading pile. Basically, if I played it anywhere besides the trading pile, okay, I can now try to rearrange trading piles again. So that's pretty much it for the logic for the bots. And you can see it just uses the same RPC mechanism that I put in place for multiplayer. So I hope you enjoyed that little dive into the code and my architecture a little bit. I really do value your feedback, and I'd love to hear any comments or suggestions you have, any questions you have. If you do have questions about how I implemented this, the place to ask those is really on my Discord server. I'll put a link in the description, so you can just go in there and post questions there, and I do my best to answer all questions. And again, I will put a link to the Steam page. Make sure you wishlist the game on Steam. If you have an iPhone, you can join the beta. I'll put a link to that as well. And if you want to join the Google Play Android playtest, send me the email address that you use for your Google Play account, and I'll add you as a tester. You can email that to me. I'll put a link to my email address in the description, or you could private message me on Discord. Now, I really do want to ask you again that you please do me a solid and like and subscribe my YouTube channel. It really does help me to grow my channel, and I'm getting close to 1,000 subs. So if you do that, I'd really be grateful. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck on your game development journey.